At supper, Johnson talked of good eating with uncommon satisfaction. Some people, said he, have a foolish way of not minding or pretending not to mind what they eat. For my part, I mind my belly very studiously and very carefully, for I look upon it that he who does not mind his belly will hardly mind anything else. He was for the moment not only serious but vehement. Yet I have heard him, upon other occasions, talk with great contempt of people who were anxious to gratify their palates, and the 206th number of his Rambler is a masterly essay against gulosity. His practice, indeed, I must acknowledge, may be considered as casting the balance of his different opinions upon the subject. For I never knew any man who relished good eating more than he did. When at table, he was totally absorbed in the business of the moment. His looks seemed riveted to his plate, nor would he, unless when in very high company, say one word, or even pay the least attention to what was said by others, till he had satisfied his appetite, which was so fierce, and indulged with such intenseness, that while in the act of eating, the veins of his forehead swelled, and generally a strong perspiration was visible. To those whose sensations were delicate, this could not but be disgusting, and it was doubtless not very suitable to the character of a philosopher, who should be distinguished by self-command. But it must be owned that Johnson, though he could be rigidly abstemious, was not a temperate man either in eating or drinking. He could refrain, but he could not use moderately. He told me that he had fasted 2 days without inconvenience, and that he had never been hungry.
The free phone is the Samsung U740 handheld mobile device, which has MP3, video, text message, and instant message functions. Students will earn text messages, talk time, and other rewards, such as free ringtones, music downloads, or even tickets, through their performance in school, the Education Department said in a news release. Students will be evaluated on the basis of attendance and behavior, along with 3 other indicators, such as homework completion, class participation, or course grades, chosen by educators and customized to address academic priorities in their specific schools. Administrators will have access to significant new data on student performance, allowing them to track the short-term indicators that contribute to larger goals of boosting student achievement and graduation rates. A Harvard economist's idea, giving free cell phone airtime to high-performing students as an incentive to continue doing well, is now in effect. School Chancellor Joel I. Klein today started the Million Motivation Campaign, an experimental program involving about 2,500 students in 7 middle schools. The students will each receive a free cell phone called the Million, with opportunities to earn minutes and other rewards if they achieve academic goals set by their principals. Teachers and administrators will also be able to use the cell phones to communicate with the students. Part of the idea, according to the Education Department, is to rebrand achievement through a messaging campaign and mentoring program. The students will receive cell phone messages promoting the idea that a middle-class lifestyle is desirable and accessible with a good education, and highlighting the accomplishments of professionals in various occupations. Participants will also have opportunities to get work experiences, life coaching, and academic help through the mentoring program.
This being acquired and established, silence would be more easy, and my desire being to gain knowledge at the same time that I improved in virtue, and considering that in conversation it was obtained rather by the use of the ears than of the tongue, and therefore wishing to break a habit I was getting into of prattling, punning, and joking, which only made me acceptable to trifling company, I gave silence the second place. This and the next order I expected would allow me more time for attending to my project and my studies. Resolution, once became habitual, would keep me firm in my endeavors to obtain all the subsequent virtues. Frugality and industry freeing me from my remaining debt, and producing affluence and independence, would make more easy the practice of sincerity and justice, etc., etc. Conceiving then that, agreeably to the advice of Pythagoras in his golden verses, daily examination would be necessary.
Postmodernism is, broadly speaking, a reaction against the movement or the period, or perhaps simply the values and beliefs of modernism. Most people, even those who seem to know what it is or was about, tend to define it in negative terms by telling us what it isn't or doesn't do. Initially, the term had a fairly limited application and referred to a new anti-modernist style of architecture. But it spread like a virus to include almost all aspects of contemporary culture. One thing we can be sure about is that it wanted to get rid of what were called the grand narratives by which we explained how the world and history got us from the past to the present. Another feature of postmodernism is its belief that truth and reality are human-centered and internal. That is, the primary source of truth in the present age is the self. This, I believe, has now all passed and been thrown in the rubbish bin of history. Yet it is difficult to know whether the age of information technology confirms the passing of postmodernism or is a consequence of it.
There is such a thing as information overload. There is just so much information out there now that we can't cope with it or fully absorb it, or even decide which bits of it we want to keep in our minds or which to discard. There is a similar thing going on with the range of choices we have as consumers. There is so much stuff out there, so much to choose from that, according to some experts, this situation is making us miserable. Most of us believe that the more we have to choose from, the better. Yet, apparently, our dissatisfaction with this wealth of choice, or rather the anxiety it produces, is part of a larger trend. It seems that as society grows more affluent and people become freer to do what they want, the unhappier they become.
Learning a language in the classroom is never easy, and quite frankly, it's not the way that most people would choose to learn if they had other options. Having said that, there are plenty of reasons for keeping languages on the school curriculum. For one thing, a fair number of students go on to take jobs in business and commerce that require a basic knowledge of a second language. When you talk to young employees in top companies, it seems that they had a career plan from the start. They were motivated to find additional things to put on their CVs, and of course language is one of those added but significant extras.
Privacy and the right to privacy are increasingly becoming hot topics in the media, which is a touch ironic given that it is often the media that is responsible for invasion of privacy. This is not just about those whose careers put them in the public eye, but ordinary people who, through no fault of their own, have come to public notice because of some event that has attracted the attention of the media. It might be that a member of their family has been imprisoned for some crime, rightfully or wrongfully, or perhaps they are the victims of some natural disaster. Some people argue that those who have chosen to be in the public sphere and have teams of public relations people to make sure they get as much public attention as possible, actors, rock stars, politicians and the like, have given up their right to privacy and get everything they deserve.
They who beheld with wonder how much he eat upon all occasions when his dinner was to his taste could not easily conceive what he must have meant by hunger. And not only was he remarkable for the extraordinary quantity which he eat, but he was, or affected to be, a man of very nice discernment in the science of cookery. He used to descant critically on the dishes which had been at table where he had dined or supped, and to recollect very minutely what he had liked. I remember when he was in Scotland, his praising Gordon's palates, a dish of palates at the Honourable Alexander Gordon's, with a warmth of expression which might have done honour to more important subjects. As for Maclaren's imitation of a made dish, it was a wretched attempt. He, about the same time, was so much displeased with the performances of a nobleman's French cook that he exclaimed with vehemence, "I'd throw such a rascal into the river," and he then proceeded to alarm a lady at whose house he was to sup, by the following manifesto of his skill. "I, madam, who live at a variety of good tables, am a much better judge of cookery than any person who has a very tolerable cook, but lives much at home, for his palate is gradually adapted to the taste of his cook, whereas, madam, in trying by a wider range, I can more exquisitely judge." When invited to dine, even with an intimate friend, he was not pleased if something better than a plain dinner was not prepared for him. I have heard him say on such an occasion, "This was a good dinner enough to be sure, but it was not a dinner to ask a man to." On the other hand, he was wont to express, with great glee, his satisfaction when he had been entertained quite to his mind.
It is difficult to know how to place Montesquieu if you're the kind of person who likes to categorize. Historian, political philosopher, sociologist, jurist, or, if you think the Persian letters a novel, a novelist. He was all these things. Perhaps, as some have, he could be placed among that almost extinct species, the man of letters. The books that make up the spirit of the laws have had the most influence on later thinkers, and in them, as in his equally great Considerations on the Causes of the Grandeur and Decadence of the Romans, he makes his underlying purpose clear. It is to make the random, apparently meaningless variety of events understandable. He wanted to find out what the historical truth was. His starting point, then, was this almost endless variety of morals, customs, ideas, laws and institutions, and to make some sense out of them. He believed it was not chance that ruled the world, and that beyond the chaos of accidents, there must be underlying causes that account for the apparent madness of things.
Well, basically just hitchhiking on the point. If you look at the customers of the Wall Street Journal, the basically financial news, financial people here are people who rely on sound, valid and timely data to make investment decisions. They look at things and track trends in the industry, worrying about things like profit maximization. If they even suspected that political issues or ideological issues from the editorial page were going to start affecting the flow of valid financial information, if they even thought that ideological issues were going to affect their ability to understand investments and make sound decisions, they'd get very upset.
In that month or 6 weeks, the patient may feel perfectly well. He may even travel around the world, spending hours packed into crowded airplanes with unsuspecting fellow passengers. That's bad enough with regular TB or with strains that are resistant to 2 or 3 mainline drugs used to treat the disease. But it's a potential public health catastrophe with a new strain called XDR-TB. For extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis, the strain is impervious to a wide array of first and second-line drugs. That's why 30% or more of its victims die. And that's why people like Lawrence Gostin are rethinking what public health authorities should do about people with suspected XDR-TB in the weeks before the diagnosis is in.
For many years, the favorite horror story about abrupt climate change was that a shift in ocean currents could radically cool Europe's climate. These currents, called the overturning circulation, bring warm water and warm temperatures north from the equator to Europe. Susan Lucier, an oceanographer at Duke University, says scientists have long worried that this ocean circulation could be disrupted.
The ocean has been getting bluer, according to a study published in the journal Nature. But that's not really good news for the planet. It means that the plants that tint the ocean green aren't doing so well. Scientists say that's because the ocean has been getting warmer.
Well, in 2004 we integrated ticketing in Southeast Queensland, so we introduced a paper ticket that allowed you to access all the three modes in Southeast Queensland, so bus, train and ferry. And the second stage of integrated ticketing is the introduction of a smart card, and the smart card will enable people to store value, so to put value on the card, and then to use the card for traveling around the system.
This is one thing we can say about babies, human babies compared to babies of other species, is that we are entirely dependent on our carers to bring us up and for us to survive. And so it's very important for babies to get into relationships with somebody who's going to look after them well. So, biology has meant that babies and the adults are geared up to be in relationship with each other from the start.
The effect of the first difference is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views, by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations.
It is about 100 years since that great Canadian-born physician Sir William Osler, Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical professions. If he knew how this influence had increased since then, he would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves, but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts and to demand that governments provide the money.
And one particular crop, almonds in the US and now in Australia, is transforming the world of beekeeping and of bees. What has happened is that something serendipitous came along, that people found out, that doctors found out that almonds are good for you. They are actually a food that is normally considered a confection, but it's good for you. The Almond Board got a very aggressive promotion going on for almonds. I just heard recently, they send out sales reps to cardiologists at hospitals to promote the heart benefits of almonds, so they go right to the doctors to do this. So they leave no stone unturned in a very good promotion of almonds, and it's legitimate promotion because they are a healthy food. So what's happened is worldwide, almond sales have taken off. There's little doubt that genetically modified crops have the potential to offer great benefits to the world, yet they continue to be opposed by many people, even though any risks attached to their use have not been clearly established. The reasons seem to be a deep distrust of the motives of large agricultural companies, along with a generalized feeling that it's always dangerous to, as some would put it, play around with nature.
Signs that secured borrowing remains robust and firm data on manufacturing and retail sales, released on Thursday, painted the picture of an economy that has yet to be cooled by the recent spate of interest rate rises.
Again, I want to repeat that I don't blame libertarians for this state of affairs. My argument is really that they simply have nothing to offer us in this debate. When we talk about trying to get rid of the welfare policies that have enabled some of the breakdown of family, that is undoubtedly important, but I think we're beyond that at this point. The damage is so deep, and it's kind of hard for me to envision a future without Social Security, for instance. I quite agree with the analysis that the Social Security, Medicare and that sort of thing, have decreased the primary functions of the family. But I cannot imagine a world in which we get rid of these things. So that we will be from a pragmatic point of view, we have to think about what we can do to try to bolster up this breakdown that I keep referring to.
Green chemistry is a concept designed to develop technologies which allow chemistry to be practiced with minimal damage to the environment or in an environmentally compatible way, and it's meant to cover both chemical processes and chemical products. The center was set up about 7 or 8 years ago, and the idea was to provide a hub of activities that covered fundamental research work, international collaboration, but also educational development on public understanding of the project as well, and also networking, so we network out to well over 1,000 people around the globe.
Dave Hackenberg, a beekeeper since 1962, can usually tell what killed his bees just by looking at them. If they're lying on the ground in front of a hive, it's probably pesticides, he says. If the bees are deformed and wingless, it's probably vampire mites. But last fall, Hackenberg saw something he had never seen before. Thousands of his bee colonies simply disappeared. He was in Florida at the time, pulling the lids off some of his commercial hives. To his horror, they were all empty.
There are some 250 million cars in America, 250 million cars in the country with just over 300 million people. And most of those vehicles, of course, are gas-powered. This poses a huge challenge given the limited supplies of oil and the growing urgency of the global warming crisis. But there is good news, according to our guests today. And that is we have the know-how and the technology to build sleek, fast automobiles that don't use gasoline. These vehicles of tomorrow are powered by hydrogen, electricity, biofuels and digital technology. And they already exist. So what's stopping us from putting them on the roads? Our guests today will help answer that.